Moat and Main, hedge fund thinking for your daily life. SpaceX is being talked about like a trillion-dollar company. Not someday. Now. Private market transactions are pushing its implied valuation higher. Starlink is growing faster than almost anyone expected. And every investor is asking the same question: how do I get in? But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people trying to value SpaceX have no idea what they're actually valuing. Because SpaceX is not one business. It's at least two. A capital-intensive rocket company, and a high-margin global internet network. One burns money. The other might mint it. And if you don't separate those two, you're not analyzing an investment. You're reacting to a story. And stories feel safe because they are simple. They compress uncertainty into a slogan: reusable rockets. Global Internet. First mover advantage. But the truth is the exact opposite. SpaceX is a bundle of different risks, stacked together, and priced as if they're all the same. So the real question isn't, will SpaceX be huge? It's this: are you thinking about it correctly, or just repeating the narrative everyone else believes? Here's what actually changed. Not the headlines. The structure. SpaceX's valuation isn't being driven by rockets anymore. It's being driven by Starlink. A global satellite internet network with millions of users and rapidly expanding coverage. And that changes everything. Because rockets are easy to romanticize. They are visible. They look like progress. But visibility isn't the same thing as economics. The question isn't, can they launch? It's, what does this do to cash flow over a decade? And for most companies, that answer is boring. For SpaceX, it's unusually hard. Because rockets are a project business. High cost. Unpredictable demand. Extreme technical risk. But Starlink? That's a network business. Recurring revenue. High switching costs. Massive scalability. Two completely different economic engines sitting inside the same company. And the market is blending them together, into a single number. That's where mistakes begin. Because when one part is amazing, it can hide the fragility of the other. Rockets can be operationally brilliant, and still produce lumpy economics. Starlink can grow quickly, and still face margin pressure from competition and regulation. And then there's the most underdiscussed risk: how the company chooses to allocate capital between the two engines. If rockets keep absorbing cash, Starlink's high-margin story is less relevant. If Starlink becomes the funding source, then you're valuing a network business that also finances a frontier project. Same company. Completely different investor experience. Because when you mix two different businesses, you don't get clarity. You get distortion. The core mistake is simple. People take a powerful narrative, and extend it in a straight line. Rockets are working, Starlink is growing, therefore. Trillion-dollar company. But that logic hides three massive assumptions. First, that Starlink becomes the dominant global internet layer. Second, that competition doesn't erode margins. Amazon's Project Kuiper is already coming. Third, that execution continues flawlessly in one of the most complex industries on Earth. Each one of those assumptions might be wrong. And if even one breaks, the entire valuation changes. And notice the deeper pattern here. Narratives don't just hide assumptions. They hide dependencies. Starlink depends on launch cadence. Launch cadence depends on reliability. Reliability depends on engineering culture. Engineering culture depends on leadership. So there's a fourth assumption most people don't say out loud, that the person at the center keeps the system coherent. But narratives don't show you assumptions. They hide them. That's why they're so powerful. And so dangerous. We need to talk about the factor most models ignore. Elon Musk. For SpaceX, he is not just a founder. He is a multiplier. And a source of uncertainty. This matters because a lot of investors aren't buying SpaceX the company. They're buying Elon the story. That can be very good. He attracts talent. He raises capital when others can't. He pushes teams toward aggressive execution. He also pulls attention and publicity toward the company's successes. But the same personal influence can be very bad. Because when one person is the organizing principle, you inherit their volatility. Reputation shocks. Regulatory friction. Public controversies. Political blowback. And leadership bandwidth. Even if the technology works, the narrative around the person can change the terms of the business. Contracts can get harder. Approvals can slow. Partnerships can hesitate. So here's the key insight: there is a key person premium embedded in the valuation, and it cuts both ways. If you are investing because you believe in Elon, you need to admit what you're actually underwriting, not just rockets and satellites, but a human being's decision-making under pressure. And humans are not smooth compounding machines. They are uncertainty engines. Howard Marks warns about this exact situation. Extrapolation. Taking what's happening now, and assuming it continues indefinitely. SpaceX today looks unstoppable. Launch cadence improving. Starlink expanding globally. Valuation rising. So the mind does something automatic, it projects that forward. But second-level thinking asks a different question. Not, what happens if everything goes right? But, what has to go right, for this to justify the current price? For SpaceX, that list is long. Global regulatory approval. Massive infrastructure scaling. Stable geopolitical environments. No major technological failure. And here's one more: the ability to keep funding the system while it's still a system. Starlink requires constant reinvestment. Satellites degrade. Capacity must be refreshed. Launches must stay cheap. And customer acquisition must stay rational. So the economic question is not, can they grow? It's, can they grow while protecting unit economics? That's not impossible. But it's not guaranteed either. And the gap between those two is where risk lives. And here's the personal version of that idea: the best case story is clean. The worst case story is messy. And most real outcomes are messy. So if your plan only works in the clean scenario, you don't have an investment thesis. You have a hope. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger approach this differently. They don't ask, is this exciting? They ask, can I understand this? Their concept is the circle of competence. And SpaceX sits at the edge of most people's circle. Not because it's bad, but because it's complex. And complexity creates a very specific failure mode: you borrow conviction from the crowd. You replace understanding with social proof. You mistake popularity for safety. You're dealing with aerospace engineering, global telecom infrastructure, government contracts, regulatory risk, capital markets. And one more layer people forget: public sentiment. Because when a company is strongly associated with one person, sentiment is not a sideshow. It becomes a transmission channel into the business. If you can't model how this business produces predictable long-term cash flow, you're not investing. You're speculating. And Buffett has always been clear about that distinction. Speculation is fine. But only if you admit that's what you're doing. So here's the model. 3 steps. First, separate the businesses. Treat rockets and Starlink as different engines. Because they behave differently. Second, list the assumptions. Not the story. The actual things that must go right. And add one category most people skip: key person risk. If leadership is part of the moat, then leadership is also part of the risk. Third, make a decision. Is this within your circle of competence? If yes, analyze deeply. If not, treat it as speculation. Not investment. Because the biggest risk isn't being wrong. It's thinking you're right, when you're actually guessing. Here's your playbook for moonshot companies like SpaceX. Step 1, label it correctly. If you cannot model it, it's speculation. And that's fine, as long as you size it accordingly. That one sentence saves people years. Because the most expensive mistake is not speculation. It's pretending speculation is a long-term investment, so you size it like your future depends on it. Step 2, assume you have no access. SpaceX is private. You may never get a clean entry point. So don't build your strategy around something you can't control. Step 3, focus on second-order exposure. Instead of chasing the headline company, look at the ecosystem around it. Suppliers. Infrastructure. Adjacent industries. If you want the theme without the single-name risk, buy the picks and shovels. The suppliers that benefit whether SpaceX wins fast, or the industry grows slowly. Step 4, demand a margin of safety. Not just in price, but in understanding. If you can't explain the business model in plain language, revenue, costs, reinvestment, competition, then your margin of safety is zero. Because in complex systems, misunderstanding is the most expensive mistake. SpaceX might become one of the most valuable companies in the world. That's not the controversial statement. Here's the controversial one: most people talking about it today won't make money from it. Not because the company fails, but because they misunderstood it. They bought the narrative, without understanding the machine underneath. And that mistake doesn't just apply to SpaceX. It shows up everywhere. In markets. In careers. In life decisions. The ability to separate story from structure is the real edge. And if you take one practical lesson from this, you don't need to be early to be right. You need to be right when it's investable. If the only way to get in is through rumor, hype, or private crumbs, that's the market telling you something. Your job is to wait. If SpaceX were public tomorrow at $1 trillion valuation, would you buy it? Or would you wait? Drop your answer in the comments. And tell me the real reason. Are you underwriting Starlink economics, or underwriting Elon? Because those are different bets. And if you want to build the kind of thinking that helps you navigate hype, risk, and uncertainty, subscribe to Moat and Main. Hedge fund thinking. For your daily life.